The old premise that past performance predicts future performance has been put to bed. This concept of cohesion is really important. How you bring people into the corporation, who you bring into the corporation, how you succession plan is absolutely fundamental to the organisational performance.
I'd love to explore a bit further about how you've seen the landscape of executive employment and executive recruitment change from when you were a sort of founding member and head of people back in 1999 with Virgin through to now. I'd love to get your take on any trends that you've seen in that space.
Executive recruitment has changed substantially. I mean, the key attributes of high quality people hasn't changed, but certainly the landscape has changed quite a bit. We have come out over the last 20 years, we've come out of what was quite a staid economy to a very, very different economy. The rise of private equity companies, the rise of overseas fund managers, the rise of overseas superannuation funds buying up our companies, paying exorbitant amounts of money and now seeking returns that perhaps were overstated is really put a lot of pressure in the executive market.
That's interesting. And in your opinion, I guess what we're seeing at Agri Talent, we have a lot of talks behind closed doors on this, but in terms of the C-suite in those firms in agriculture, what do you think are the key attributes at the moment that businesses are chasing? And then off the back of that, what do you think those key attributes should be?
Look, one of the, and Groisberg and others have written about this, the old premise that past performance predicts future performance has been put to bed. The portability of performance is now known not to be as portable as what we thought. So traditionally, people will go out and try to find a high-performing executive and slot them into their business. That needs to be done with a lot of caution. What we're suggesting to people is to take a much deeper dive. The big driver is the intellect, to be able to deal with the complexity of what's going on in the world today, and also realising that organisation structures are very different. You know, having a 30-year career and being able to be at the top of an organisation may not be the panacea to drive the organisation forward. So we're looking for people who have learning agility. Most of the big corporations now are using this term, looking for people who realise that everything that got them to this point in their career may not be what's necessary to take their career forward. So this understanding of learning agility, people used to call it humility, because they were open to listening to other people, but it's really it's not this humble approach. It's being open to learning, and it's not just all about AI. It's just being able to express the organizational context to the people in the organization, and then utilize everybody in the company. The old hierarchical designing systems and processes and integrating systems and processes is just far too slow, too cumbersome, and we need executives who understand that and who are able to change their organisations to keep pace with what's happening.
I'd love to hear your take on how you've seen in your career personally, going from a startup of Virgin with literally a couple of you starting that business from scratch in Australia, getting out of that into the likes of Olam. You've done consulting, you've been in agriculture for a really long time. In terms of that learning agility, I'm interested as to what your biggest, as an executive in that space, and now somebody who's curating the careers, I guess, of executives in ag, what's been your biggest humility point, and where has that learning agility really come into the fore for you? What have you learnt through your career?
The Virgin Blue morphing into Virgin Australia was probably a case study that Australians should take a lot of note in. Virgin Blue started 25 years ago, and after after 20 years, it was the darling of the stock market for the first 5 or 6 years, and then slid into receivership over a 20-year period. And one of the things that you can track with Virgin is a highly cohesive group of executives that were then watered down over time with people with amazing track records in different companies. And this is this portability of performance that we talk about, bringing in executives from overseas to join the boards, to join the executive team, and watching this organization move away from its core and then morph into something that it never should have been, and then slide into receivership. So to answer your question, putting together boards and putting together executive teams is probably the biggest learning that I've taken away. When you bring people in from different organizations to examine a problem, what you get is their external experience, and you just get a whole lot of executives and board members arguing amongst each other about the best way forward. So that's probably the greatest learning, is the governance of an organization and the people that are selected to run it is far more important than I think most Australian businesses give it credit for. And Virgin Blue should be a beautiful example of how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
I think then to apply that to what we do now, if you could, look at the agricultural sector in particular, and, working with a lot of the larger listed or private equity companies as we do at Agri Talent, where do you see the quickest wins for those businesses in their executive teams? So what should a large listed company that's, for example, looking for a new chief operating officer, what are the core attributes that should be non-negotiables, no matter agnostic of crop or anything like that? What should they be looking for?
For me, the fundamentals of agriculture are quality is grown. Executives who get distracted by all the things that you want to be distracted by, but ultimately your returns are going to be dictated by the quality of the produce that you grow. You cannot fix it in the pack sheds. You cannot fix it in the processing centre. You need to be focusing your attention as an executive on building a team of people that can grow quality produce that meets the requirements of the retailers, meets the requirements of Costco and Aldi and these global organizations. And if you're unable to do that, the returns that you're hoping for just simply won't be there. The executives, there's in my view, Australian corporations have been playing follow the leader. They follow the leader with remuneration. They follow the leader with the way they structure their executive teams. I believe there's a underrepresentation in executive teams of core business, and there's an overrepresentation of the functions. And I think Australian agriculture needs to get back to core business. We need to find people that understand that unless you are growing outstanding produce, your returns will not come, and really start to focus their attention on, have we got the right people? Are we giving those people the right support, rather than burdening the organisation with overheads to identify the problems which stem, maybe 2 years before, because the wrong agronomy was applied 2 years before. So you really do need to have a deep understanding of the sector.
That's absolutely fundamental, and one of the core takeaways that I know we certainly talk to a lot of our clients about. There is this, unfortunately, we are very, very, unfortunately or fortunately, governed in Australia by compliance and legislation and all the rest of it. So there has been a shift, and I've certainly seen it 2 years of recruiting, to recruiting executives who are very much about risk mitigation, as opposed to driving profit. And it's almost they cannibalize themselves. And when there's pressure put on because there's no profit, of course, risks go through the roof in terms of safety. So it's a real juggling act. But I think what you just said then about focusing on produce is the core for ag. And we've almost I think a lot of businesses have lost their way a little bit on that. So I think it's just getting back to fundamentals. You've hit the nail on the head, Bruce.
I think if you look at corporate agriculture, 15 years ago, they were the bright light. They were consolidating, and they haven't performed. And if you look at the Australian Agricultural Index, which is only about 11 corporate listed companies, the performance is red over the last 5 years, even in the last 12 months. So they've got to get away from just trying to have a high share price and bringing in more and more executives to solve the problem, and focusing on what the private owners of large farming corporations in Australia, they actually know how to farm, and they do a bloody good job, and they're the best in the world. Yeah, to your point, Kelly, getting back to the core.
That makes it all the more important to get the right executives, which brings us back to, obviously, those non-negotiables. And I think we use that word a lot here, or that phrase, because it is key. And I think understanding what it is that you want and what the outcome of that new role or that replacement role that you're going to market with is. And often we'll ask a client that question, and we met with a little bit of, good question. So I think our clients getting really clear on what they would need that person to achieve. But then, Bruce, that leads into, cohesion and team cohesion. You spoke about that earlier on. I'd love to hear a bit more, a quick snapshot, and I know you could talk about this all day, but of your take on team cohesion within business, in particular agribusiness.
It has now been proved beyond any shadow of a doubt, and this work has all been done by an Australian, Ben Darwin, who runs Gainline Analytics. He can prove to corporations with numbers that the way that they structure their executive teams will have an impact on results. And he did it at Virgin, and we did it at Olam as well, where we could look at productivity that was directly attributable to groups of people who understood one another, understood what they were doing, and had worked together for longer periods of time than they'd worked externally. So where we were recruiting superstars, and lots of them, into new businesses and focusing on the culture, we ended up with lower performance than when we broke all the rules. We had husband and wife teams. We were doing all the things that people tell you shouldn't do, but we just had high cohesion, and we were getting nameplate productivity out of our gins and out of our orchards that were much higher than we should have. This concept of cohesion is really important. So how you bring people into the corporation, who you bring into the corporation, how you succession plan is absolutely fundamental to the organizational performance. It's crucial.
You touched on culture, and I like the inverted commas. Tell me what you think good culture means in your words, and what you think it's become.
Well, I'll start by saying, and 40 years in HR, the mantra has always been fix the culture, get financial outcomes. It's the reverse. If you're focused on core business and people are motivated because they're seeing real progress with the organization, the culture is an outcome of motivated people, and the definition of the term motivation is clear and visible progress. It's that simple. If you work in an organization that's bureaucratic, slow moving, nothing's happening, it's siloed, you will not have motivated people. No matter what you do to try to fix the culture, if you're not focused on the work of the organization, how the organization is put together, how it's structured, whether you've got the right people in the right roles doing the right things, if you do not have those fundamentals in place, you will not be able to address your culture. And it's so obvious. You can have somebody who's deemed to be a fantastic leader, and you promote them to the level of their incompetence, and they will no longer be a good leader. So the concept of leadership is about capability at the level. It's not about wearing a cardigan and being nice to people. So culture is an outcome. It is crucial that you have the culture you want, but you can also you can design the culture you want. So at Virgin Blue, we looked at designing our own culture. We looked at all of the systems and processes in the large corporate airlines, and we reversed them. So at Qantas, the CEO sits in row 1. In Virgin, Brett Godfrey, the CEO, sat in row 30. When we travelled on duty travel, all the people, executives and everybody who was travelling on duty travel would help the flight attendants clean the planes so we could get fast turnarounds. We provided travel benefits, not on status and hierarchy, but on chronology. Whether you were the CEO or a pit crew handling bags, you had the same benefits in terms of flights and travel and all those sorts of things. So we deliberately designed our culture using systems and processes and symbolism. Richard Branson, in terms of symbolism, he is the master of it. So if we would have our first or second or third birthday party, Richard Branson would fly in and he would stand at the hangar door and there would be 1,000 people invited and he would shake the hands and take photos with every single person as they came in. And I'll still visit people and they'll still have a picture of Richard, on their mantelpiece with them shaking Richard's hand. It's just so powerful. So understanding building cultures around systems, behaviour and symbols is key. But getting the work right is fundamental. It's a very tricky question. Fundamentally, if you are going to be in a leadership role and you're going to design a strategy and have create a strategic approach, as McKinsey would say, where to play, how to win, you do need to have a deep understanding of the industry that you're leading. Now, the only situation where you don't is where you have somebody who is intensely bright and with amazing cognitive abilities to be able to very quickly grasp how this organization fits into its industry and into the global picture. But for your average executive, and when I don't mean average by being average, but being within that data set in around the median, having a deep understanding of Australian agriculture, of the land and the soil profiles, of the climate is very important. Now, I work for a global organisation where we had a frost and lost 20% of our crop, and there were people overseas saying you're just giving excuses. We used to call them spreadsheet farmers. So it is very difficult to come into an agricultural organisation and have any impact in the first 24 months. It will take you at least 2 years to get your head around it. If the board can tolerate that, then great. But we do see examples of people coming in from other industries being paid exorbitant sums of money, but taking a fair while to come up to speed. So that is one of the risks of bringing in people that don't have agricultural background.
And I think just to follow on there, Bruce, it's what we are seeing at the moment is a real succession shortage in Australian ag. And I'm certain it's across other industries too, but we can only speak for ag in that there is this need to bring in executives, even if they're within the same industry, from outside of your organisation, because there hasn't really been this nurturing of management and leadership talent coming through. Especially with the change from, the family farm through the corporatisation that Bruce spoke about over the last 20 years. We haven't seen that succession planning done well across the board. So there is a gap. So I think when you're recruiting executives, it's really important to look at everything Bruce just spoke about, but also those skills around building a team of skills underneath them that they can bring up and through, because we haven't seen that and it is biting now. So we may not see the outcome of that for 5 to 10 years, but I think it's like the trades industry. There's a gap because 10 years ago, no one was putting on apprentices or whatever that looks like. So I think we need to see any executive coming into businesses, they need to be able to demonstrate that ability to build the organisation underneath them. That's a critical skill set.
Kelly, I could not agree with that more. If you take a critical look at Australia, we have an agricultural index for our ASX listed companies. There are 11 companies that are listed. Of those 11, 2 of them are over 1.3 billion. So there's a couple that are, in the 4 or 5 billion market capitalisation range. The other 9 are under 1.2 billion in terms of their market capitalisation. So there are 9 organisations that provide some sort of succession ability for executives in this country. It's minute. So then who else do we draw from? Family businesses. We've seen the introduction of overseas fund managers. We've seen the introduction of private equity people. They're drawing on these corporates. So it is a very, very small pool. So organisations who are not thinking seriously about finding high capability young people and giving them every opportunity and blooding them and developing them are going to be like, I remember, I've been doing this for 40 years, but I remember when we ran out of tradesmen, people go, well, we're the tradesmen. It's like, well, you just cancelled all the apprenticeships to save money. We did that when all the tariffs came off in Australia. We just shut down that we stopped employing tradespeople, and we're doing that with executives in this country at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. And we are seeing a real regurge of talent, particularly in that board level. And we talk about it a lot in Agri Talent, that it just becomes this revolving door of, they've sat on 10 other boards, let's get them on our board, which may well be the right move, but it may not be either. I think it's really key to look at when we're doing board appointments, that previous performance, as Bruce said, as you just said, is not always an indicator of how they're going to add value, because the rate of change in businesses right now is huge. We just got off a Teams meeting with one of our largest clients, and their strategy now incorporates AI at an executive level, that they're having to review monthly because of the pace, and if they don't keep up with it. So what I'm saying there is what we might have looked for in a board 5 years ago is going to be very different to what we're looking for now. And the professional board sitters, I would suggest, may not be, in general, the best appointments for your business if you're looking for growth.
I agree, Kelly, and I'm sensing that organisations are going back to not being overly concerned about risk mitigation and being more concerned about selecting people on their boards who have deeper understanding and can help the CEO, as opposed to pick holes in the CEO strategy and then rely on their legal or financial expertise to pick holes in the business rather than help the CEO develop a strategy. One of the difficulties I believe executives face in Australian agriculture is overseas companies have come in at a time when land values have been skyrocketing, and so they've purchased properties or manufacturing units, and they've seen those increase in value, and they've been very, very happy with the results. So everyone was quite relaxed. But now the chickens are starting to come home to roost, and people are looking for real returns, real cash returns. The produce is being produced, it's being sold, and there's a really good, strong cash flow and a good return for investors. And as we know in Australian agriculture, there's always challenges. So what we have is a group of executives, not all of them, there are some who've done extremely well in the last few years, but there's quite a number, especially in the private equity space, I would say, or even superannuation space, who are now under a lot of pressure because overseas investors were told that the returns are fantastic and sustainable, and we know that that's not the case in Australian agriculture. And so there's enormous pressure on executives, and they need to be able to they need to be able to influence the board. And we've seen a number of CEOs in the last few years who just simply haven't had the background and haven't been able to convince the board that the reasons that they're having the problems in their organisation are valid and real. So it is a very challenging environment for executives in that space at the moment.